We got our Micron results back, and I think we're pretty happy with the data that we were given from the labs. Had a chance to go through some of it, and wanted today to talk about 3 key specifications. Kind of a departure from people normally just talking about, what this average fiber diameter is. We're looking at 3 other pieces of data from these samples, and Rich is going to talk about the extremes of both of them from sheep in our flock so that you can actually see what they all mean by looking at a fleece sample. And the first one we're going to talk about is called coarse edge mean. Rich, if you want to just kind of go over that, what that means.
It basically separates all the fiber samples that they tested. Let's say you take a sheep, I don't know, hairy, for example, is one of the finest ones in our flock. They test all the fibers that we send in from top to bottom, thousands of samples that they take, measurements that they take. And then they'll just say, okay, the overall average is this, the standard deviation is this, and there's a bunch of statistics they give us. What coarse edge mean is you take all those readings and they take the top 5%, take an average of that, and then they take the overall average and they subtract those numbers. The difference is your coarse edge mean. So as you can see here, here's your main population of fibers. Here's your coarsest 5%. There's the average of that, the average of your overall. Subtract those numbers, that gives you your coarse edge mean. And why would you want to know that? So for example, if your average is 22 microns, and you're all excited about that, but then you find out your coarse edge mean is 15. Now you know that there's 15 micron, the coarsest 5% are 15 microns larger than the 22. So you got samples that are 37 microns. 5% of the samples are 37 microns on average. Not really something you want, because that's going to be very coarse.
That's like that example you said of the steel wool and a thing of silk. If you have 4 strands of steel wool and silk, you're going to feel the steel wool, right?
Yeah, so if you have, the higher your coarse edge mean, the more the coarser the fibers are, the worse it's going to impact your nice population of, even though 95% of the fibers average 22 microns, like I just said, that other 15 microns, that are 15 microns higher, is really going to adversely impact the softness of your wool. So yeah, it's also an indication of double coating. So my rule of thumb is, and I don't know if there's an absolute rule on this, but I think most people like to use 10 microns, coarse edge mean of 10 as your cutoff. If you're less than 10, you look pretty consistent. It's not a lot of double coating. If you get over 10, closer to 15 to 20, which we've seen in the past, you can even get much higher than that, then that's not a good number. For our flock, that's not a good number.
So anything greater than 10 is an indication that it's probably a double coated or tending towards double coated.
Yeah, it's not just, well, you're single coated and then you go up to a coarse edge mean of 11, now you're double coated. It's not quite like that. It's a continuum like anything else. You're starting to get up towards more and more coarse fibers, which are in essence the coarse guard hairs, the hairy fibers that you would get in a double coated breed for like Icelandic or something like that. Scottish blackface, things that are supposed to be double coated, they would have huge coarse edge means, and that wouldn't be a negative thing for those breeds. Right. But for our fine fleece program, that is a negative thing. Not for Shetlands as a whole. I'm not saying every Shetland should be that, but once you get over 10, you are getting towards the double coated. And if that's what you want, just understand that, because that's the way it works.
All right, well that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about 2 ewes in our flock. Now we've gotten to the point where our fleeces are very consistent from one ewe to the next, but you can still see differences, ewes and rams actually. So we identified 2 ewes from the flock that had extremes of that number. So it was Sojourner and Lucretia. So you've got samples there of both of those.
So this is Sojourner to start with.
And so her course edge mean was 6.9. And if you want to know what any of the other numbers are, just let me know. I got them here.
She was 6.9.
Course edge mean of 6.9. So she was the lowest.
So I can't, obviously can't tell how well this is showing up, but you can see this is very fine. What's the micron on this one?
Her average fiber diameter was 20.9.
20.9, and how old is she?
She's yearling.
So she won this year?
Yeah.
All right, so she was last year's lamb. You would expect to have a low micron. And of course, as sheep age, the micron tends to increase. But you can see how fine and crimpy and very stretchy, elastic this is. Lots of bounce to the sample. Pretty good length too for as fine as she is. So she's got all the qualities you would like, and the course edge mean is 6.9.
She's out of Pearl, if that makes any.
Pearl is one of our flock matriarchs, probably our first fine fleece Shetland that we had born here. And so it's good that we're still getting production out of her. I mean, we're not breeding her anymore, but you know, we like to keep her offspring because they always tend to be good.
Right.
All right, so she's a gray cat mulget. You can see the darkness of the fiber. It's always interesting what their second fleece is going to look like, but this one looks really good.
And then the other one is Lucretia. So I got to say, she's not a yearling. She wasn't a lamb last year. She was a lamb 2 years ago. So this was her first breeding year. And she's has a
2 years old.
So she's 2, sorry. So Lucretia had a course edge mean of 10.5. So Lucretia and Sojourner are the same age.
So Lucretia and Sojourner are the same age. They're both 2?
Yeah.
Oh, so I thought she was a yearling.
I know. Sorry about that.
Okay, so that's even better because
Right.
Sojourner looks like a lamb and she's actually 2 years old. Her fleece anyway. She doesn't look like a lamb. So Lucretia is white sheep. Now, I don't know exactly what to demonstrate here, except it's hard because the sheep are coated. So what you would see probably is more tip on this one because it's a higher course edge mean. And I can see that, but it's kind of matted down because of the coating, the coats that they were wearing. So, but it's still very fine and crimp, very fine crimp. Dense fleece, this one is.
She does have a nice dense fleece.
And what is her micron?
Hers is 20.8. Has a spinning fineness of 21.1. She's really good.
So their averages are essentially the same, Sojourner and Lucretia, but she has more double coating than Sojourner does. So what is, we're going to get into some of these with other sheep, but what is her comfort factor?
Comfort factor percent, Lucretia is 94.5.
94.5 is still excellent for a 2-year-old Shetland. And what was Sojourner's? It was higher than that.
98.7.
98.7 is exceptional. So that's the difference. You can see. So we'll talk more about this, but the comfort factor is the percent of the fibers in the sample that are less than 30 microns. So all the measurements they took, 98 point something was less than 30 microns. So that ties in with the course edge mean, because the course edge mean, of course, is measuring
They all tie together.
how far apart your top 5% average is to your overall average. Comfort factor says, well, let's take all the fibers, measure them. How many were less than 30 microns?
And that 30 is the threshold for humans' ability
Yeah,
to
that's
handle.
the wool standard for scratchiness, the scratch factor, if you will, the itch factor. You want to get as many fibers less than 30 microns as you can, because then when you say my average is 20.9, you know that there aren't any high ones that are over 30. So you want to try and do that. It's very hard because the older they get, you usually don't get numbers like that. The comfort factors at 98% at 2 years old is extremely difficult to get.
Great.
Unusual.
Okay.
So those two were pretty good.
Okay, the second of the three specs we're going to be looking at is less than 15%. That's how they write it on the chart. So what does that mean, and what's the indication for fleeces?
They're giving you a statistic to tell you what percent of, you remember I said the comfort factor was what percent are less than 30 microns?
Yeah.
That's all the measurements, what percent of those were less than 30 microns. This one is what percent of the samples were less than 15 microns, which is extremely fine, right? I'm not even sure why they tell you this. Maybe merinos want to know this, merino breeders, because they're one of the finer breeds, right? Mm-hmm. I never use this number. It's always interesting when I see it on there. So the first sheep that we're looking at here, the first fiber is from SIF, and her percent less than 15 was
0.4.
0.4. So not many less than 15. That's not surprising because her overall average was close to 25.
Mm-hmm. 24.5, right.
And her spinning fineness was
23.2.
23.2. So of the ones we sent in, her numbers are higher than, her average is higher than some of the other ones.
Yeah. Our
Most of the
overall
other ones.
flock average was 21.7.
For spinning fineness or
No,
average?
nope, sorry, for AFD. For spinning
Okay,
fineness,
that's fine.
21.1. So pretty much.
21.1
Was the
spinning
flock
fineness for
average.
the average. So
Yeah.
she's quite a bit above that. I guess you don't see it when you look at the fiber, but it's certainly not as fine as the other two we looked at earlier, the 2-year-old sheep. She's 3. You know, at some point, like 4 years old, maybe they plateau, and that's pretty much where they are. But they usually keep increasing until they get to that point. So yeah,
That's a great, I love her fleece though. So, I mean, this isn't, you know, these extremes are within a flock that's already pretty much what we want it to be, right? So none of these are, that's not a terrible number.
no, but
right?
with everything else, you know,
Right.
in any statistic you're looking at, any population of anything you're studying, half are going to be above your average and half are going to be below. That's
Yeah.
just, you know.
Okay, so then the other ewe that we brought out was Gertrude, and she's a lamb. So she's just less than a year, and her less than 15% was 22%, excuse me. She's out of Lakshmi and John Snow.
Yeah, so you can see how fine this is. It's interesting that there's tip here, because this is one of the shorter fleeces that I've looked at. I mean, we have shorter ones. She's a lamb. The other thing I tend to see is when you get a high percent below 15 microns, they tend to be shorter fleeces. Usually finer, it means shorter. It's just, I don't know. I can't explain that, but that's just the way it is. They're correlated. I've never seen a long, say 4-inch fleece, 4-inch long fleece, 5-inch long, that had a percent rated less than 15. Anything.
At whatever, at like 22, like hers is, right?
Yeah, you just don't see that. But if you want something with really fine fiber, and just out of curiosity, Gertrude, her average was what again?
Her average fiber diameter was 17.7.
17.7, which is really low.
Well, if you want to spin like a lace weight or something like that,
Yeah.
you don't need a super long staple for a really fine gossamer type lace weight. So that's where it makes sense to me, right? That's typical Shetland, right? When they were making those beautiful gossamer lace shawls and stuff. I just want to look and see what her, I want to see what Harry, because Harry, I just want to, Harry's less than 15%, so he's going to kind of belie this whole thing, is 15. But he's got a nice staple length. We're going to talk about him though, so I won't, ahead. I won't jump ahead. Sorry about that.
It's just in short, no pun intended. I don't think you're going to go to Shetland and find anything this fine. In mainland England, you probably would find stuff like this. Similar maybe, but I don't, just from the research I've done, it doesn't seem like this is more common in Shetland. Most of their fleeces are longer, not as fine as this. And not that they're not very nice, because I mean, obviously, Oliver Henry at Jameson and Smith, he grades these, or he doesn't anymore, but he used to. He was the grader. They still grade their fleeces, and they still have a super fine category, which is the finest, 3% that they have on the island. And that's going to be super fine lace weight, supreme lace weight type stuff.
Probably more like Sif's fleece.
Probably more like Sif's fleece.
Yes, right.
Yeah. Which would also qualify for grade 1.
Right.
So anyway.
The last spec we're going to cover is CRV. We got a couple examples for that, but Rich, what's CRV? It's CRV DG/MM is the way they characterize it.
I don't know, what am I, the Sphinx? Curvature is a measure of
Curvature, okay.
is really they're measuring the zigzag pattern of the crimp. So when you look at the so what are we talking about here?
CRV.
Yeah, I was thinking something else. I was thinking about the
CV,
CV,
yeah.
which is actually called CRV. But all right, so Texas A&M don't know what they're doing. They don't know right. No, that's right. Coefficient of variation is CV. CRV is curvature. Totally kidding. They know what they're doing. We'll just edit that part out.
All right,
So,
so that's Duncan, 120.
Just as a rule, a higher number means tinier, tighter crimp. A lower number, it's perfectly within the standard. The standard requires crimp. It doesn't say, well, you have to have a high CRV. There's no mention of statistics in the breed standard. So it's hard to say one is better than the other, but for what we're breeding for, we'd like the smaller, organized crimp. And that's what CRV measures. The higher number means you get smaller, more organized crimp. So, all right. So the first one we have is, what'd you say his name was, Duncan?
Duncan, and he had 127.5. He was a lamb last year. He's a 2021.
Yeah, so we'll show a close-up of this in the video because this doesn't do it justice. It's just like a spider web fineness and very crimpy. Tiny crimpy. You look at it at first, you say, wow, this sheep doesn't have any crimp. But when you get into the higher CRVs, that's what you get. You look at it and you're like, all right, I'd like to see some more crimp in my fleece. But the reality is this is the best crimp you can have.
Yeah, it looks almost like it's straight unless you look at it really closely and carefully and feel it.
So when you see a high CRV in a Shetland fleece, they're going to be more elastic. They're really going to stretch more. They're like springs and they're just all coiled up, and then you pull on it, they stretch out like 2 or 3 times the normal length.
So if you're looking for a fleece to make socks, you're going to want to look for a high CRV because you want the elasticity.
Yeah, it's elasticity you're getting with that. So it has some functional value. It's not just a number. But I think the main takeaway is that a lot of times the high CRV fleeces look to be too short. They look short, but there's a relationship because they'll stretch more than the bolder crimp, the bigger crimp. They're always shorter. It isn't always that way. It's genetics, but most of the ones I've seen are shorter. When you get a longer 4 or 5 inch fleece that has a really high CRV, let me know about it because we don't see it very often. Mm-hmm. Although we are trying to get that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was Duncan. Okay, then the other one is Sebastian, who was also he's also a lamb. He was born last year. His CRV is 79.2.
79.2. So what I would say about him is also very stretchy. His fleece is longer, just as I said. It may not look like it on camera, but when we give a closer look at it, you should see it. The difference, I think, is the tip. So his CRV is lower than what we normally use in a ram for sure. What was his...
Coarse edge mean?
Yeah.
9.2. So
that's getting up there, and it's closer to 10. So you can see tending to double coating, which is what I see here. Mm-hmm. And I remember last summer, I didn't like his fleece at all. I was like, wow, he's like our best ram structurally. He's just built really well. So I wanted to keep him and use him, but I didn't like his fleece. But his fleece really changed a lot, as they often do heading into the fall. and we did use him because
Yeah.
even though it's a different fleece type than we breed for, there's too much to like there to not use him. And what was his average?
Average was 18.9.
So he's extremely fine. A little unusual to have really fine and also a higher coarse edge mean. What was his coefficient of variation?
26. That's pretty high, isn't it?
Yeah, so the coefficient of variation is your standard deviation. Let's see, what did you say it was again?
26.
So your standard deviation, which is your variation, amount of variation in your fibers divided by your average. And that gives you a baseline so you can compare all the sheep in your flock. It essentially normalizes them. So you can say, all right, here's a standard deviation of 5. Is that too high? What is the standard deviation?
4.9.
That's like 5. So that's higher than we normally get. And when you divide it by how fine he is, that gives you a higher CV. So normally we like to see coefficient of variations less than 20% is normally what we go for. But when you got something that fine, you know, you tend to say, well, he has a lot of qualities that we like.
Well,
you maybe make an exception.
Because, yeah, if you look at our spinning fineness average, flock average is 21.1. So I think we're at the point now where we can start inserting other desirable traits like, you know, the frame and stuff like that, right? We don't have to solely be looking at, I think that was the play with this guy, right? So.
There's things that you want in your flock, conformation-wise. You want good bone structure, you want wide legs, flat backs, level back, proper head, all that stuff. And if you don't have it and you get one in a ram, then you might want to use that ram more so you can get more of your lambs like that.
Yeah. And he's an Itasca grandson too, so him and Otto Knightley.
Yeah, so we liked his bloodline as well, his color. The other knock on him was that he's a half pole. He's got skurs, and I don't like that. But there's nothing wrong with that either, so that's not really a disqualification. But normally when we're making choices, all the numbers look really good, and then we say, well, we're not going to use him because I don't like the skurs. But in this case, we're making exceptions.
Right.
So very good. He's the best ram we have out there, but fleece-wise, he's just not right in line with what we normally do. The last thing I would say about Sebastian that's worth pointing out is he's got an average of 18.9. We already said his coefficient of variation of 26 was really high for our flock. 9.2 comfort factor, or CEM, which again is a little bit high for us. Perfectly acceptable, because anything less than 10 I said was good. He has 22.6% of his fibers less than 15 microns. So there's a lot of fine fibers in there. And then there's some coarser fibers. That's why the standard deviation is so high. But his comfort factor is 99%, so 99% of the fibers are less than 30 microns. And his spinning fineness was 19.3. So that's the other thing we look for. We tend to go for sheep that have spinning finenesses less than their average. And it tells you your variation's minimal. And your average is your average is good, but since there's so little variation, it actually feels finer than what the average tells you. In his case, his spinning fineness is a little bit higher than the average, which means that it's roughly what you're seeing in the average is what you're getting. That's what the fleece is. That's not always the case with Shetlands, but that's just an interesting thing I noticed about his sample that was different than probably all the other ones.
All right, so we talked about 3 important specifications, and the reason I wanted to cover those with you guys is our fleece sales coming up here, and I know that you all like to do different things with wool, so I wanted to give you those numbers that are a little bit of a departure from average fiber diameter so that it can help you in your selection. So any fleece I have up on the site that I'm going to be offering will have all this data provided, so that you can, you know, like I said, if you're looking to make socks or if you're looking to make gossamer shawls, you now know what to look for with our numbers and you can make those comparisons. The last thing I wanted to do in this video is I've got 4 different sheep here, and they're just sheep that we really like. We like their fiber, we like how they look, They're kind of flock favorites. They're very reliable. And so I wanted to just look at each of them and look at those three specs about them and just kind of have a conversation, reflect, and take it from there. Okay, the first of our favorites, or one of our favorites, is Alice Paul. If you want to talk about her sample and her information.
Alice Paul is a fawn cat mulget, but as you can see, you might think she's white because it's a very light color. We found the fawn cat mulgets, they might start out darker as lambs and then they always lighten up as they get older. I think she's 3 years old.
She was born in 2020.
Oh, so she's only 2 years old.
Right.
All right, so this is her second fleece. I really like her fleece. First of all, it's crimpy, very stretchy, very elastic, good length to it. One thing I notice is we go out there and we take the samples, the fleece looks really long on the animal, and then we cut the fleece and then it looks shorter. The sample looks shorter, I don't know why. But her average is 20.1 microns as a 2-year-old. Standard deviation is a little bit higher at 4.8, much like Sebastian.
He was 4.9, right.
So she has a higher CV of 23.9%. Her CEM is 8.8, which is more than acceptable for us. There's not much double coating there. We've looked at it.
It's right in between Sojourner and Lucretia, because Sojourner was 6.9.
It's just really nice crimp. 114 CRV, which is really fine, nice crimp. In our beginning, or even more recently, we would never see CRVs that high at a 2-year-old Shetland. Not in our flock, anyway.
Do you have a target for CRV? Do you have a?
I just like over 100.
Over
I
100?
find, but I don't know if I really would say we have a target. When I look at like Sebastian, I would say, oh, that's way too low. Normally, I would say that. And then with this one, I would say, oh no, that's right where we want it. 100, over 100, 110s, the 100 teens. Comfort factor of 97.2% for her. Again, we've got lower comfort factor or higher comfort factors. But as a 2-year-old, her percent of fibers less than 15 are 12.4%. So there's a lot of fine fibers in here. And when you got fine fibers in here and you don't have any obvious double coating, that's a pretty good thing.
Yeah.
If you got fine fibers and then a bunch of coarse fibers, now you got some problems to deal with. And not only that, I've always found her fleece to be very lustery, lots of luster, shiny, silky is really what it's called. And
yeah, I'd like to see a first-time spinner get this fleece. I think it's going to be a really easy fleece to spin. In my opinion, right?
Now the other interesting thing is she is out of, her sire was Nightly. Sebastian's sire was Nightly as well. So they both have a little bit higher CEMs, higher standard deviations, higher CVs, which you think, oh, must have come from his father. His numbers were not high like that.
Her mother is Gilly.
And it's just one of those things that happens. They're related, they're half brother and sister. But I don't really know how to explain it. There's probably something in his background that probably has something like that in there.
Okay, so now the next one I want you to talk about is John Snow.
Yeah, John Snow is a ram that we have that we've used quite a few years.
I mean, if you had to guess what his numbers were, just look at his fleece. Do you want to play this game or no? Quiz ya. So here's his wool. We were able to rue off a massive amount because he's...
She knows I hate to play games, I guess.
You don't have to do this if you don't want to. If
all
you're
right.
really way off, we don't have to use the film.
Right away, when you look at him, you would say maybe some double coating, higher CV, higher CEM. I would look at this and say the average is pretty low, and I would judge that based on the fine crimp, because I've never seen a high average with fine crimp. I've never seen it in all my years of doing this. Of course, high is relative, but you're not going to see 22 microns or 32 microns usually with fine crimp like this. All right, so his lamb, I remember him as a lamb, his average was like 20 microns. And I remember Jen was playing around with it and saying, oh my God, this ram is really fine. So I went and looked at the Micron report, and it was something like 20 microns. I don't remember exactly. How old is he now?
He was 2017, I think. Hold on, let me just make sure. Yeah, 2017.
So he's 5. He's as coarse now as he'll ever be. And he's at 20.3 microns average. Standard deviation of 4.1. His CV is 20%. So that's really an ideal fleece for us. The length, average CV, coarse edge mean 7.4. So I said, look, it looks like maybe some double coating. He doesn't have any double coating. It's just a longer fleece, a little bit of tip. He rues like crazy every year in February, unfortunately.
So frustrating, I know it.
And percent of fibers, 7.8% less than 15 microns, which is unheard of, you know, for Shetlands that age. And a comfort factor of 99.5% is just nuts. I don't really know how to explain it, given his bloodline. CRV is 87.5. So if I look at this fleece, I would say CRV's got to be 100 or better, but it's not. According to this, it's at 87.5, which is closer to Sebastian, I think. But then again, remember, as the sheep get older, their crimp gets bigger. Just age is not kind to Shetland fleeces or any sheep fleeces. They always get worse as they get older, which is relative because they can still be great.
This is really good. I mean, it's probably going to end up going into comb top, his fiber, because like Rich said, he's almost pretty much all root off, and it's dirty, and he's an adult ram, so it smells really bad, but it'll contribute to make that comb top really nice.
Now his mother is
he's out of English Garden and Darcy. So
there's an interesting case study. You got English Garden, who is an F2 Jericho, coarsest sheep in our fleece.
Right.
In our flock.
She had a 29.4 AFD. This is her.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what it is already, probably. But
29.4 CV of 25.7, 13.9 CEM. So she's the only one in our flock that is kind of pole vaulting over that 10 micron CEM. So she's got some double coating. She falls off in the back. But we bred her to, what's his name again?
Darcy.
Mr. Darcy, who was a very dark cat moget, shorter fleece, extremely fine, less than 20 microns. Everything was, except for the length, which was too short, everything else was right in the ballpark of what we want. And then we were able to get a sheep that's much longer fleece like his mother's, but with all the traits that Mr. Darcy had. That doesn't happen very often. You try and throw them together like that, but it did in this case.
He's our little secretariat, right?
He is, I guess. Awesome. I don't know exactly how that happened, but sometimes it's all percentages, and you look at the whole genetic history, and then you just spin the wheel, and then sometimes things connect that you want between both parents, and it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes you get the worst of both parents, or the worst of the grandparents, or whatever it is. So we've used him a lot. We have a lot of his offspring.
Yep, we do. All right, the next one that we really like is Belva's fleece. And Belva is, right here is her Micron.
Why do we like her?
2020. It's a dense fleece. I like the length. I like how it feels.
So she's a 2-year-old, like Alice Paul.
Yeah.
So my first impression of this is finer than Alice Paul. Silky like her, elastic, very fine crimp. So let's look at the numbers. Her Micron was 22.7. CB of less than 20, 19.7. CEM 7.6. Let's see, comfort factor 95.8. CRV of 104, which is better than 100. So that's what I would have guessed. It's hard to. I would have just said better than 100. I can't really look at it and predict what it is. I just know it's what we breed for when I look at it.
But she's no Duncan at 127, right? I mean, it's not that kind of crimp on that.
No,
You
but
can
it's longer
see
than
it.
his.
Right.
Right? So you're always balancing crimp, fineness against the length of the fleece. And if you can spin the wheel and get all three line up, like in slot machines, then you win the prize. So she's got that. I think that's why we like her. She has all the traits for a 2-year-old that we like. I don't think there's really anything else to point out with her. I can't even tell you, what is she, a fawn? I don't even know what color
She's
that is.
white.
She's white, okay.
Yeah, she's actually Harry's sister out of Ophavia.
So they were siblings, they were born together, twins.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. So are we gonna look at Harry next?
Yeah. This is Harry's numbers right here.
Okay. So this is Harry's full sister. They were born the same year, both 2 years old. She's at
Wait, this is Harry's.
I forgot her. Oh, 22.7 microns. So
There's Harry.
with one breeding, we got two sheep that had really good numbers.
I think that's why we picked her to talk about, because her and Harry are siblings, and it does show that.
All right, so I look at this, and this is a ram fleece. Honestly, it doesn't jump out at me as being noteworthy. One thing you can see though is they didn't have coats on them, so you can see the full lock structure, which is very good. You got that delta-shaped lock structure, which is what Shetlands are known for. I look at it and say, well, this is fine. It's very springy. CRV should be pretty good. And I don't know what it is until I look right now. So his average is 19 microns for a 2-year-old Shetland Ram. So when I look at the fleece and I see that, I'm like, all right, this is good news, because sometimes you look at the average and that doesn't mean a lot to you. But when I look at this, it's got good length and it's got good crimp. So I know if the average is low, we got a winner here. So his average is low. His CV is 21.6, which is a little bit higher. CEM though is 7.1, which is pretty low. It's about as low as you're going to get. What's the lowest?
Sojourner was 6.9.
She was the lowest one in the whole flock.
She was I don't know if she was the lowest one in the whole
So
flock.
I'm not saying that's as low as you can get. We've probably had lower, I don't know. But to have good length and have a good low CEM like that is pretty rare and pretty desirable. Less than 15 micron, 15% less than 15 microns. So that's still as a 2-year-old. He's got a lot of fine fibers.
Gertrude was 22, and she's a lamb. That was our extreme. And the one.
Okay. Comfort factor of 99.9%. I don't really have the words to explain that one, because for a 2-year-old Shetland sheep, that's, and back in the day, I wouldn't have believed you could ever get that.
Are you going to start crying?
No, I get a little choked up here. I mean, back in the day, I didn't think we'd ever have Shetlands this fine. And you're always looking for that really nice ram that you can use to try and get that more in your flock. And here's one that we didn't have to buy. He was just born here. Who's he out of?
He's out of Ophavia and John Snow. John Snow. Ophavia had a very bold crimp. She still does. We have her in the flock. It's a nice fleece, but her, give me a second, let me find her.
Who's she out of? She is out of, what's her face?
Ophavia is out of Rewick.
She's out of Rewick, which is Garrett's ewe.
Yep, a white pine ewe. So Ophavia's coarse edge mean was kind of high, let's see, or whatever, it was low. That's not what I'm looking for. Her CRV was low, 79.7. See, it's a good thing I'm not the numbers person. So right with Sebastian, their mother.
Yeah, but Ophavia, She's a nice Shetland. She's small.
I love her.
You want her to be. That's what you want.
Yep.
And then to take Rewick, and we bred her to John Snow, and then we got a Fabia, which is I don't want to say an improvement on Rewick because Rewick had a lot of traits that were really nice. She's built really well for a Shetland, very nice, everything. She did have a boulder crimp. She was fine. She was actually super fine. So nothing, not really what we breed for, but perfectly acceptable Shetland, above average Shetland. And fleece-wise, I mean, she was exceptional in other ways.
She had a 96.5 CF percent.
Who did?
Ophavia.
Yeah, so Fabia
His mother.
is more like what we breed for, so that's why we kept her.
Okay, so back to Harry.
And then she had 2 lambs that were like this, that
Yeah.
were really good. So kind of validates our decision to what we did.
And we used Harry last year in breeding. His fleece is almost all off of him.
I can't believe how much he ruined.
I know it.
I can't believe.
But they rub against each other. They're in close quarters, those rams, and so it's unfortunate. But his wool will also probably go into the white comb top pool.
It was hard to get a sample for him because so much wool had already come off of him.
It's pretty sickening.
Which is, I don't know, as a Shetland or a primitive breed, you look for ruining as one of the traits for primitive breeds. So you like them to develop the rise, you like them to be able to go out there and pluck the fiber off. You don't want it to happen in February,
Right.
which is the coldest month around here. And you like to be controlled where you can go out and pull it off, not the nature pulls it off for you. With the tussling and whatever they do out there, it comes off. That's, but that's a trait that you want. But you want to be able to get the fleece off the animal and you use it. So.
And we don't coat the rams because it's not a safe. It's just not safe. If anything, if the coat starts to.
I don't know. I need to talk to people about this and see how many people do that. I've always felt it's not safe, which probably means it isn't. Because when you look at the things that can go wrong, though my rule of thumb is, well, if you can find a weakness in a fence or anything where something can go wrong, with Shetlands it will go wrong. It always has. So if there's
if a ram gets caught up in a fence, different than a ewe getting caught up in a fence. If a ram is not caught up in a fence, right, all the other rams are gonna take advantage of that, right?
Yeah. So if the ram's coat comes off and it gets caught in something and he's trying to struggle to pull, they're gonna attack him. Absolutely, you're right. It's just more risk of it coming off, first of all, because they're always jostling out there. And if it does come off, it's catastrophic because they're going to just tee off on them. They think something's wrong with them and it's a weakness and they need to go after it. So I'm pretty sure if we coated them, something would happen. But I need to talk to people and see what other people do because it would be nice to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know in his case whether that would make a difference to keep more of the fleece on.
I think it would. But.
I don't know. But anyway, that's the deal with Harry. So we used him again. We used him as a lamb. We used him again last fall.
He got a nice big group this time. We only gave him 3 ewes his first shot, but this last time he got a nice big group. So.
The only thing with him is for some reason the adult rams didn't like him, so we had to pull him out because they were just teeing off on him. They wouldn't accept him. When we put them back together in the fall or December after breeding, so I had to move them over with the lamb rams, and they were fine together. Which I don't usually mix adult rams and lambs, but it worked in this case.
He's such a gentle temperament.
Yeah, he doesn't really want to fight. The other ones didn't like him, though. I don't know why. Yeah. Probably jealous of his fiber.
All right. Well, like I said, I just wanted to go through the numbers because I do provide the numbers with the fleeces. So hopefully this gives you the ability to make better decisions based on using numbers for what it is you want to accomplish with your fleece. So any questions, leave them in the comments. We love to get comments, and it also helps us to get ideas for future episodes. And thank you very much. This is Mrs. Hughes. She's a 2016 ewe. This is the year that we used the Downton Abbey naming convention. She's a gray catmugget and a nice dark gray catmugget. She is out of Mr. Darcy and Kelly Kelly. Kelly Kelly was a solid brown ewe. but she got the gray and the catnugget pattern from her sire, Mr. Darcy. This is the ewe I used to make that bumbly yarn in the video last week. So what happened with her was she didn't hit the rise last year because she didn't get bred, I think. So what I want to just check here quick is to see if she's got a good break this year, because I would like to rue her. It's a really pretty dark gray, very striking. And I mean, she is ruing, so she's definitely going to be a candidate to get rued this year. I love her really curly tips, and I had a friend that characterized that as bumbly, which I have turned into a positive trait because you can now, I can make that lock spun yarn that's so pretty. And here I'll give the Micron information we just got on her. She's definitely a super fine ewe. She stayed in the flock all these years because when Rich was talking on the Micron segment about those older ewes that maintain a really low Micron count, they're the ones we want to breed with because that's what we want our flock profile to be. So this is Mrs. Hughes. You want to show a look at their face? Let's see. You want to look at the camera? She's a pretty face. She's got the really cool pattern on her head. Just a really great ewe. She's done really well for us. This is English Garden. So she's a 2011 ewe. So she's definitely the most senior ewe in our flock. What is she, 10, 11 years old? So she is out of Itasca and Little Buckaroo. So, but Little Buckaroo was a result of an AI attempt we did that was successful. So we used him, and so she's got the UK genetics that we were really looking to use to get to the finer fleeces. Her fleece is not super fine, but it is a very nice fleece, really nice to work with. And she's a gray catnugget. So Little Buckaroo was a fawn catnugget and Itasca was a solid black. So in this case, she got the black base from her mother and the catnugget markings from her sire. And she's John Snow's mother, who we use for breeding pretty intensely the last couple years. And we talked about his fleece, how he got to be this super fine fleece that actually stayed fine over the years. So he got the nice length from English Garden. So she did us a big service. I'm really fond of her. She's a good girl. So this beautiful ewe is Eleanor, and she is out of our Pearl and Egyptian Autumn. And Pearl, as we know, is one of our finest ewes when we started out, kind of our foundation ewe for this fine fleece effort that we're working on. And Eleanor is a gorgeous dark gray catnugget. She looks like she's a black ewe, but she's actually dark charcoal gray. So Pearl was a gray catnugget, and Egyptian Autumn, her sire, was a fawn catnugget. So the catnugget was pretty much a foregone conclusion, but fortunately she turned out to be this really nice, pretty dark color. She was born in 2015, and so that means she's still in the breeding stock. We usually retire them at 10 years. And it's just a really nice ewe, love her wool. Let's just take a quick look at it. Like I said, it's just this gorgeous dark charcoal color. And I'm just doing a quick check of ruing. She is ruing really nicely, so we'll put her on the list of ewes to be rued instead of sheared. The coat back on. Her coat is fitting her perfectly. Comfortable, right? Let's just take a look at your pretty face. She's a little more fine-boned, I think. Would you agree? Than our other ewes in the flock. Put your head up, sweetheart. Let's look at your face. So that's Eleanor. So this is Fanny. She came from the year that we named everybody after Jane Austen characters out of Jane Austen novels. So she's a 2015 ewe. She is out of Siena and Canterbury. So Siena and Canterbury were both fawn cat muggets. Canterbury had a really fine fleece and Siena had a beautiful long staple length. So Fanny kind of was one of those, the breeding wins where we got a nice fine fleece with a really nice staple length. Really? Twin? So Knightley was her twin brother, which I didn't know that. And Knightley also very fine with a nice staple length. So I just want to double check to see if she's going to be a candidate for ruing. And I can see, well, it would look like it, but it's not coming off easily. So she's going to get sheared. I think she got sheared last year as well. So that's Fanny. So this is O'Brien. She is a solid Morit ewe. Very impressive, just beautiful. Everything about her is gorgeous. She was born in 2016, so that's the Downton Abbey year. Her mother was Mustang Sally, who was a solid brown ewe, and her father was Mr. Darcy, again, the gray cat mugget. So this time, the roll of the dice yielded a solid brown ewe, even though her sire was a cat mugget. So yeah, so her fleece has always stayed nice and fine, which is why she's still in the flock, even though she's, a fairly senior ewe. Take a look at her fleece. These coats really keep the fleeces so nice and clean. I just love them. Now she's kind of a lighter taupe color. She's not a dark, rich Morit, which is really pretty. It spins up beautifully. And I have rued her in the past, so let's just do a check here and see. I don't know. It's not coming off as easily as I'd like, so she'll probably end up being a sheared candidate. And this is Baxter, and Baxter is a black ewe, again from that Downton Abbey year, which was 2016. And she is out of Curie and Mr. Darcy. So Mr. Darcy was used pretty heavily this year. And we got this gorgeous dark black ewe. Last year she gave us twin rams, which is pretty impressive seeing that she's fairly small in size. She's a fairly dainty ewe, but she does produce pretty reliably. Her fleece, I always thought she had a short staple length, but what I learned was that we were shearing her at that point in the rise where the shearer wasn't really able to get a good lock out of her. So I rued her last year, so this tip here is all like real new growth. There's no second cut from the shearing blades. And I'm really hoping, yeah, she's gonna rue again real easily. It's coming off super easy. So she will be rued again, and we'll have a gorgeous black fleece from her that I would suggest, if it were me, I would do a lock spun from this because she does have such beautifully defined staples. So that's our Baxter. So I'm here, and I gotta get cracking because I hit a detour that held me up a little bit. But we're here, and I'm gonna unpack now, and we'll get going. Here's all my stuff. I don't even know what time it is. There's my friend Cindy. We're a little coffee break.
You want me to put this on?
Sure, yeah. What's the pattern again?
Rotenberg? I can't remember the designer,
That's all right, I'll find it.
but it goes really good.
Beautiful. So that's from our yarn.
Yes, that's your yarn from 2 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
Let me think back. Seattle, that's a good one. It's an hour, it's almost 2 hours away.
It's the last hour. Which is the longest part of the day. It's gotten a lot quieter. But it was an awesome show. Really enjoyed it.